Hi, so in this video we're going to, instead of printing out the data, we'll persist it to a database. Really quick though, I want to point out that I did notice the link to the recipe was also in the h3 tag where we got the description. And so instead of doing two search functions or methods on the soup object, I just stored it as a variable and then got what I needed out of it that way. I feel like that's more efficient. So just want to point that out really quick. Now go ahead and open up Terminal, and I have Postgres running on this machine on port 5432. So using the command line tool, I'm just going to create a database called recipe, and also just get dbeaver moving. And then when you type PSQL, you're into the Postgres shell, and from here we're going to create a Python user. And the commands are create user, then the name of the user with the password of whatever the password is in single quotes. I typed it wrong here, so let's try again without the equal sign. And you can't see it, but it says create role. That's how you know it went through. And then we want to grant that user, Python, all the privileges on the recipe database which we just created. So that command is grant all privileges on database recipe to Python. Now let's hop into dbeaver and check it out. We'll choose the Postgres database, enter in the username, which was Python, the password, which was password, and define the database, or type recipe in the database line. And then create the connection, and we can see that it is in here. It is ready to go. There's just nothing in it yet. All right, so now we can go back to VS Code and write a Python file. We're going to define some SQLAlchemy objects that are going to allow us to interact with this database programmatically. In here, let's create a file. I'm just going to call it db.py. And what it's going to be is a SQLAlchemy ORM dealio. So here is their homepage. I usually come to reference for, okay, go there, and then probably want, this is probably a good way to go. So you can just kind of follow through this, and that's what we're going to do. So let's import the engine. That's okay. Anyway, so engine is this. This is not us. That looks like an in-memory database. We actually have a real database. And so we just need to write out the connection string. Postgres is like the dialect, or PostgreSQL is going to be the dialect. The plus psychopg2 is the client. It's like the Python client that's SQLAlchemy is going to use to like write SQL queries or just kind of overall communicate with the database. Then we're going to do Python, which is the username of the database, the password after Python, and then at the host name, followed by /recipe, which is the name of the database. So I'm actually just wondering, yeah, that's another thing that we need to install. Maybe now that'll go away. That might take a second. So that's the engine. What else do we need? We need declarative base. So if you haven't noticed, I'm not really into like explaining every last detail about stuff. I just like to, this is mostly like to kind of get practice for myself because I haven't done this for a really long time. And also just for anybody out there who might just kind of want to see how everything works together. I know there's like a lot of resources out there. Maybe they're really in depth about like how stuff works. I just kind of want to show it working because I know sometimes that's just helpful just to see. So anyway, so we have engine base. Now this is how you define a table or like an object that relates to a table. So we're going to be using integer and string. And again, I just want to test this before we get too far. Okay, so engine base. Now we write the table. I'm not going to copy that because it's not what we're doing. So class, we're going to have, I think we'll have a URL table. URL, our object will be capital, but the table name will be lowercase. So you inherit base, and then you want to tell it, I think it would automatically name the table the lowercase of your class name, but let's just be explicit. Column this is just kind of standard. Primary key is true, and then we're going to have the URL, and oops, string. Converting from a Mac keyboard, from like going between the two different keyboards, it gets weird to me. We're having name, and we're having image. And then I'm not going to worry about this repr thing. It's kind of cool, but I don't know. So yeah, I think that's basically what we need for now. And so now when we run this, let's pop over to dbeaver again. Still no tables in here, but if this works, I don't see why it wouldn't. We'll refresh. Oh, I think we forgot the create. You have to call create. Oh yeah. So without, I really wish, I'll resolve this between this video and the next, why this is happening, because I'm missing a lot of the features when it doesn't have everything hooked up properly. So there we go, create all. Still not there. Let's run it again. There we go, because echoes on true, so now we see it created that table. And we should come here and see that we have a URL table with said columns. I don't know why, I just think this is like the coolest thing ever. It's just cool to me, like being able to do that. So yeah, let's go back to, so we have this. So we're going to be using this, we're going to be creating URL objects as we scrape and then inserting them. And we insert them with something called session. So it's going to be session equals session maker, and it's bind engine. So I kind of had to go through the documentation. Here it is. So we had the engine, so we did bind automatically, and then session equals session, and then this is what we're going to be doing. You just do that and add, but it's actually, we're going to be doing add all because we're doing a lot. and then session.commit. So this little tutorial kind of has it all for what we're doing. Yeah. So back to here. We've got all this happening. Now we go to here. And then in this, so we can store these as variables. And so it'll be name. Recipe name. And then this will be, this was the recipe URL. And this one is image. Okay, so all that fun stuff. So for everyone, let's create a empty array or list, and then go through, gather up all that stuff, and then I guess we'll need to import db, because that's where our object is defined, and we'll say, I guess this is technically URLs, and for each one, create a URL object. Let's call it URL. That is URL, and I like to do that, make it easier. db.url, and the what do we have in there? URL name image. Let's not call it name, because I think that's a reserved word in SQL or Postgres. So we'll call it recipe name. So, okay, URL equals recipe URL, and because we didn't do that, let's not do it there. And then recipe name equals recipe name, image equals image. Okay. There we go. And then got that. And then what we'll do is urls.append URL. Beautiful. And then after it goes through all the posts, we're going to say session.add all db.session add all URLs. Okay. Now, let's just think about this. So we're going to go through, so that would be like however many per page just got added to session. And I guess it would make sense after this breaks, let's do session.commit. Okay, cool. That makes sense to me. And then I think it might make sense to do try catch blocks, just because not every, like the few recipe examples that we had, they worked, but there's always the chance that it's going to fail. We don't want the whole program to crash just because of that. So in that case, so I guess we could put both of these try h3, and then let's do the URL, because the URL is like the meat of this. So URL is that, and then if that doesn't work, we don't really want to insert anything without a URL. So if that fails, we'll just go to the next one. Print the exception. Okay, and then if this fails, we still want to as E. We don't want to continue, because continue will take us to the next one. For this case, I think we should print E. We don't really need to know if this fails. It's just the name. We can have some nameless ones in there. I think that'd be all right. But we do kind of want to then, and then I do think it's best to .SQL.null, because if you insert an empty string or like a Python null, none, I don't think it's not like, it'll show up as like an empty string in the database, which I think it's better to insert it as null. So if there's no recipe name in h3.text, we'll just move on. And I'm just trying to think, like, try h3. If that fails, if there's no h3, we don't get that. I guess what we could do is nest another try except, because we did have that other method of getting the URL that first way, the find a.gethref. But let's just go with what we have, and hopefully it works. If not, we can go back and fix it up. So last one is try image accept exception as E, and then in that case we'll say image equals SQLAlchemy. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Maybe just to see it happening, we can print out recipe name. Okay, so I think this is good. I guess the main part of this whole thing is that you're creating this URL object, appending it to a list, putting that list into our session object, and then after we get through one whole category, we commit, and then it should be there. It should be in our database. So let's actually go ahead and print recipe type as well. That'll be an indication that it is a commit has completed. Okay, cool. Now, I think it's good to run. Earlier we did this for testing. Let's take it out, and that way our database will be clean. And then let's uncomment out this. All right, I think everything's ready. Actually, we need to instantiate a session object in db.py. Found it in the docs, but I forgot to bring it in. I knew there'd be something. So, yeah, that looks better. Now I'm just wondering, hopefully, this guy's still empty. There we go. Okay, good. Still empty. No big deal if it wasn't, but anyway, there we go. I think we fixed it. Background on this error. URL, insert into recipe name. Oh, did we not change it here? Oh, I think I know what happened, because we ran it that first time as name, and then I changed the name, and it won't overwrite your changes. This create all, there's probably some way to make it, because like if we wanted to add a column, you know, like new column, and then we ran this again, that wouldn't work. But I'm sure there's a way to make it work, but with what we have here, it's not going to work. So I I still want to keep it called recipe name, but we need to come here and drop this table because it's still name here, and as I just explained, it's not going to change. So have you Control Enter? There we go. So refresh. Okay, that table's gone. Now it should do its thing. Okay. Third time's a charm. Okay, anytime because we have echo on, echo equals true. So we see this, we know it made an insertion. That's what .commit does. I think it's .commit. We'll do that. Yep, because here's a vegan breakfast. Handy. All right, so now, come over here. To not drop it, let's say select, let's just do all from URL limit 15. And there they are. There's our recipes. So that is pretty much the goal for this video. I think that's pretty neat. The ORM thing really makes me happy. So let's just kind of see, make sure everything's all right. Ginger soy veggie stir fry, ginger soy veggie stir fry, and then we should see a picture of this recipe here. Okay, great. So seems to be operating just fine. It's still rolling, or is it? Oh, it's done. So, yep, thanks for watching. In the next video, we will actually now go into the recipe and get all of this information, the ingredients, the description, the instructions, maybe some of this stuff, and like maybe the author or something like that, and actually put that in the database. So that's going to involve another table. We could just add columns, but I think it makes more sense to have the URLs in one table and then look to the table of URLs, take those URLs, make the request, then get this data, then persist that. So that'll be next.